now, oh, that probably makes a difference. I had to go ahead and share the screen, and we are recording. All right, well, welcome. We're going to dive into session number 4. And what I want to start with, you've got your handout. Okay, great. Lynn, you're good. What I want to start with is a little review, just kind of going over some of the things that we've done. And what I want to talk about, this sort of summarizes the putting it all together, sort of a one-page summary, and where we've been going with all of this, whether it's the singles court, whether it's the doubles court, is that the best players, the best tennis players really use their 25 seconds and manage that between point time and use their 4 steps to manage their emotions and playing their best. And your job throughout this whole class is to really work on and creating and personalizing your version of it. And this sheet will help you with that. So you really want to be able to summarize. I put in the sheet there some of the things that you often see around how people react and what they do physically and how they recover. Some of that may work for you. Some of it may not. But what I want you to do is you have your own sort of cheat sheet in terms of when you're playing well, what do you look like in each one of those steps? So that's my goal for you, is that that's the most powerful thing that you can walk away with, is what is your customized game face routine for you, whether it's singles or doubles. And the other thing we introduced last week is really talking about what the best doubles teams do, and that it's a very distinct kind of X-factor pattern that they use in between points versus sort of the parallel lines or parallel lives that we talked about. Because otherwise, with the parallel lines or lives, it really looks like just 2 singles players out on the doubles court. And this is what makes the connection powerful and makes doubles, to me, different and more rewarding when you play like this. And some of the questions I got was that you may not use your whole 25 seconds in between points, and this is true for singles or doubles. But what I absolutely want you to do is to make sure you touch upon each of the 4 steps. Whether you go the full allotted time on them or not isn't really that important. I would say, though, if things are starting to go fast on the court, or you're getting behind, or you're feeling anxious or frustrated, you definitely, I would say that all the time to my players, like, slow down, use your time. Because when we tend to get nervous, we tend to go faster and not have that recovery time. So you want to make sure, no matter if you're using all 25 seconds or not, that you follow and work through those 4 steps to make sure that you're ready for that next point. And what I wanted to dive into tonight is really some of the obstacles that can get in our way. And in the moment, what are some of the things that we can do to handle in the moment and train for some of the stuff that we run into in the heat of the battle? To me, that's why I started with the 4 steps, because a lot of times people will come up to me and say, well, I have this issue with, I get mad all the time, or this happens. And without really those 4 steps, it's tough to handle one little individual thing. And the 4 steps really go a long way to helping you kind of maintain your game face and your confidence on the court. And the more you practice them, the more they become automatic, and you're going to feel your confidence improve on the court regardless. But I want to start where, there's times when stuff happens out there on the court that can derail us. How do we manage? How do we work through that when we've gotten off track, if you will, from our 4 steps? How do we get back on track? How do we snap out of it in the moment and bring ourselves back to what we know that we can do? And so tonight I want to talk about some of those things. Like I said, whether it's getting mad, whether it's, you were like me and it's just you have a deal with choking, hanging on to mistakes, or you get easily distracted, what can we do to work on those things if those are some of the things and obstacles that derail you? So let's take a look at each one, and more importantly, we're going to take a look at each one, but I also want to take a look at kind of the antidote, if you will. So the one that I like to start with first, because believe it or not, anger is probably the easiest emotion for all of us to go to. It's one that we go to very quickly. Some good news about anger. I mean, it's a way that I've seen a lot of players choose to deal with their nerves. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's about saving face, that they'd much rather be known as getting angry than being, nervous or choking. But the problem is that the chemistry, the biochemistry of anger is really powerful. I mean, you've experienced in your body, whether on the court or off. And it takes a toll. It takes a toll on our physiology and our performance, whether it's our coordination, our balance, being able to think clearly, see clearly. Boy, the chemistry of anger just is not conducive to that. And what I learned, which was awesome, somebody told me, because I would struggle with this as well, is somebody said, you got to remember, Kath, that anger is just one letter short of danger. So it is. It's a dangerous thing that we can tend to go to. So let's take a look at, all right, two things I want to talk about. How do we deal with anger? And the way I like to talk about these antidotes is what's something that you can do, boom, in the moment when you're on the court, because we always want to be able to figure out a way to get out of it. And a lot of this just comes from my coaching. Being like, I love coaching in college because I could actually coach during a match, whether on the changeovers or even being able to talk to somebody in between points. So I learned a lot of these techniques by trying to, all of my athletes went through one of these things. And so I had this great laboratory and sort of playing field about, all right, boom, I got this kid who's really angry on the court. What can I do right now? How can I coach her to get out of this in the moment? So that's where this comes from. And I think the first thing, being angry out there is the first thing is to slow down, because when we're angry, everything tends to try to speed up and go faster. So the first thing to do is to slow yourself down on the courts, change your pacing, and then the next tool that we always have with us, and you're going to hear this one a lot tonight, is your breath. And the breath is such a powerful tool, and it's one of the best ways to kind of manage and control and calm down some of our emotions in the moment. So when you're angry, taking a long, deep breath. And what I would get my athletes to do is to actually inhale through the nose, long through the nose, and then a long exhale through the mouth. Because what I found is if they're just inhaling and exhaling through the mouth, it tends to be short. So taking the time, maybe it's just smaller air holes or something with the nose, but taking a long, deep breath through the nose tends to take a little bit longer, a little more focused. So using that breath to help calm down, that is a huge one. And the other thing is when you use your breathing and you're taking long, deep breaths, it's pretty much impossible to be angry. It loosens up the body, it loosens up the muscles, because when we're angry, we tend to clench everything. And then in the mind, saying things to yourself that are positive or challenging, we talked about on the high road, things that are really incongruent with being angry. And, angry with, this sucks, I hate this, da, 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 da. But versus saying something like, all right, come on, no worries, right back, you can do this. Take your time here, pull it together. So you may still use in the mindset, not like Pollyanna talking la la la, because that if your angry self is just going to go, oh yeah, right. But being forceful, being decisive, and again, this is how I would talk to my athletes. They were all keyed up So if I tried to be sweet and nice, which didn't usually happen anyway, they would look at me like with daggers coming through their eyes, like, yeah, right. So I learned to be able to positive, but very intentional, giving them something intentional and specific to do. All right, take a few more seconds here. All right, I want you to look at your strings, take a deep breath. Those kind of cues came in really handy to try to break that cycle of anger on the court. And if it's a theme for you, one of the things that you want to do is also start to be aware of it and do some things off court. And I think one of the first things, which just was fascinating to me, was you kind of have to notice it. Because some people are so comfortable being angry on the court that they don't even realize that's what they're doing. So yeah, okay, notice that I'm getting a little out of control. I get angry, admit it, right? And then make it a priority and setting a goal to deal with it. And I bet that another way to work on it, because oftentimes if we're getting angry on the court, my guess is that you also might get angry off the court. And think about it. How many times a day do we get upset about something? So working on those same skills, when you start to feel anger bubbling up, whether it's in traffic or somebody at work or children, whatever age, noticing that you can feel that chemistry of anger is starting to bubble up. Okay, slow down a moment, take a deep breath, and really start to trigger in that antidote plan, whether you're on court or off, and can help you manage it more quickly when you are on the court. So that's anger. That's a big one. Now the next one I want to talk about is choking, which is unfortunately something when I was growing up, like I mentioned before, that I just knew all too well. And the first thing, and I wish somebody had told me this when I was younger, is that nervous is normal. You know, there's nothing wrong with being nervous. It happens to everybody. And even the best players in the world get nervous. And one thing I learned as a coach was I was actually more nervous if my players weren't nervous, because it's a sign of energy and that they care. Then the next thing I heard that, again, I wish I had known earlier, someone described it to me as that it's just excitement without the breath. Because nervous, I mean, it's energy, it's swirling energy, and it tends to be kind of stuck in the upper part of your chest and here. It's just because we're not breathing. So learning to use our breath, not to dwell on it, right, to notice it and work on moving on, is one of the things we're going to talk about. Because when nerves go unchecked, you know, the result is often choking, and I think that for a lot of people that's the most feared state in sports and in tennis. So we want to learn how to catch it early, but recognize that it's normal. It's not a big deal. We can train for it. So let's take a look at some of the antidotes here. Okay, notice on court, first one again. Just what I described, because when we're choking, I mean literally, again, everything is tight, is tense, nervous, different than anger, but nervous energy tends to be constricted and tight in our chest, in the back of our throat. Okay, whereas anger, it can be felt through the body, but breathing does the same thing. And I can't tell you how many times that was my on-court coaching to my athletes, was just to remember to breathe. You know, I'm almost thinking that maybe I should make one of those, those Live Strong bands, or somebody's made those bands that you can put on your racket. It's just like a big one. It just says breathe. I mean, it's such a powerful, powerful tool. So using your breath is a huge one on the court. And then moving around. I mean, I actually ended up calling these kind of the 3 Bs. So breathe, bounce, which means to move around, bounce on your toes like you see tennis players do, or like a boxer, and kind of shaking things out. Because again, when we start to choke and we get really nervous like that, we kind of get that stuck deer in headlights feeling, and we're kind of frozen in our body. And so moving, light on your feet, bouncing, does a couple things. It kind of helps get the blood flowing again and can start to shake us out of that deer in headlights feeling. Believe me, it's one that I just know and can remember all too well. Then the last one, we did 3 Bs when I did this with my athletes. I called it breathe, bounce, and bang. I was trying to come up with another B. And that means reconnecting with your body, because oftentimes when we're choking, we're nervous, things get tight. I'll hear athletes say, yeah, I can't even feel my hand on the racket. I have no touch, I have no feel. And when we're choking and all of that blood flow is constricted, and so you can't feel like you feel that deer in headlights, you can't even feel your hand, and you're not even sure how to get the control of the racket. So reconnecting can be, clapping or slapping your thigh, your hand, or sometimes you see players kind of take their hand and clap or bounce the racket, the strings on their hands. They're doing that to kind of bring blood flow back to the area. It's another thing that we would talk about in doubles, reconnecting. Like if you go up and connect or high five with your partner, again, just that sting, that clap brings the feeling and the blood flow back to your hand. So choking, a big one, is just to breathe, bounce, move around. Different than anger, I wanted you to slow down. This one, when you're choking, you're getting nervous, you want to actually move, but lightly, loosely move and bounce around and get yourself get back into your body. And then off court, this took me a long time, to admit it. And now it's easier for me. I mean, for an athlete to say they choke is like, it's the pink elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it. But I do, because I've been there and I know people do it, and I want to give people the tools. So yeah, if you choke, you get tight, you get nervous, admit it. Visualize, and that's going to be one of the things that we're going to be working on, one of the tools I want to give you. But visualize working through it. In your mind, if this is something that comes up for you, I mean, you could in detail look at, I know exactly what I look like and feel like and everything in my body when I'm tight and when I'm choking. So reverse it in your mind and visualize whether you're serving for the set or it's a tiebreaker or whatever those things are that trigger that sort of choking response. Visualize yourself doing it differently. Get into your body and see, okay, what would this look like? What would this feel like? How would I do this? Okay? And then off court, this was a huge thing that helped me, was using relaxation techniques. Yoga for me has been a huge one, just knowing how to move my body and breathe and relax. Done with Coach Brogan, I learned sort of meditation and breathing exercises, and we trained our team on all of that. So just knowing how in the moment to calm my mind down. Some other folks have done Tai Chi, which is another, I've never done that, but it's a great way to be in your body, present and moving, and yet calm. So if it's something that you struggle with, there are off-court techniques that, believe me, have an impact when you work on those and take them on the court with you. Okay. So those are some antidotes for taking a look at choking, getting really nervous. The next one, let's take a look here at mistakes and getting totally hooked by mistakes. Sometimes mistakes can lead to the other things we just talked about, being, anger or choking. But there are some folks that just get so upset or taken out of their game when they make a mistake, which is such a funny thing to me because, number one, has anyone ever in their life had a mistake-free day? And funny, I'll tell you that. I asked that question in my coaching workshops, and I've coached thousands of coaches over the years from Positive Coaching Alliance. And I had two guys say, yeah, I've had a mistake-free day. And they both said the same thing because they were in a coma. I'm like, okay, I'm not quite sure what got you in the coma, but all right. So mistakes, they're part of life, and they're part of the game. I mean, I don't know if anybody has ever had a golden match. I know there have been a couple pro players that have come close to a golden set where they've, never lost a point. But it's part of, it's part of the game. When you realize in tennis, this is the other thing that I thought about. If you do the math, a tennis match differential can come down between 1 point. I can win the match by just one more point than you, or vice versa. I can lose the match. We played neck and neck, and I can lose by the difference of 1 point. So, given that, mistakes are going to happen, and it's not the mistake. It's really the most important thing is how we respond to it. So let's take a look at some on-court things. If you tend to get hooked by mistakes, what can we do to snap out of it? Again, move. Maybe you walk away from it, for instance. You turn your back to it, walk away from the mistake. Versus when I see somebody, I love the stance where people will stand there, hands on their hip, and they just sort of stare. Maybe it's the ball in the bottom of the net, and they're frustrated, and they just stand there and stare at it. Like, okay, that's going to not help it. It's going to dwell in it. And then kind of fake it till you make it. Act as if. So turn your back to it, amp it up, walk in that tall, confident stance no matter what. Your posture, really amp it up in the face of mistake to just train your body, trick your body to get out of that habit, because it's that reaction that we talked about earlier when there's a mistake, and it's that first second if you kind of let your shoulders drop or things go like that. And if you're making them and you want to get that back, that feeling of confidence, it's almost like overacting in that moment of that tall, confident posture no matter what. Really drive it. Really make sure that you're holding your racket parallel to the ground, racket head up, and drive that emotion out by really having the strong physical component. And then adding strong images, thoughts and words, seeing yourself doing it correct next time, telling yourself, no worries, right back. I got this one, next. Whatever it is, it just keeps the mind flowing in the direction of confidence. And then the last thing is a mistake ritual. Now, with Game Face, and we talked about 80, 10-10, that most of the time we want to have 80% of the time, tall, strong, confident posture, 10% you get to celebrate, 10% you get to let off some steam. Okay, but there's also, if the match comes down to a difference of 1 point, you're going to lose a fair number of points. So how do we do that, and how do we keep ourselves? So a mistake ritual can be anything from turning your back to the mistake. That's what you see a lot of tennis players do. Maybe making a motion with your kind of non-racket hand, like you're throwing something away, throwing it behind you, like really like making it motion with your hand to let it go. Something, or whether it's a shadow swing, that's one of the things that I often do, and I don't see enough people do it. If I make a mistake, what I want to do right now in the moment, I have my reaction, I keep it tall, confident, but I'll take just, right before I go into recovery, I'll take a second and I'll just do a quick practice swing, a shadow swing, okay? Because I know I'm going to see that ball again. Whatever shot I just missed, chances are I'm going to see it again, and chances are I'm going to see it again in that match. So, all right, I want to program my brain that the next time that ball comes there, boom, I'm going to hit it like this. I'm going to make the correction. So I'm leaving my body and mind with what I want to do next time. versus when we make a mistake, people stand there and dwell on it. And what gets kind of imprinted in our mind and our muscles is what we just did wrong. So mixing it up by doing a correction swing. Okay? Off the court, study role models. Again, there's players that we admire, whether they're successful at the 3-0, 4-0 league, at the club, whether they're professionals. What are some of the better players that you see do? Because of course they're going to make mistakes too. Professional players, it'd be interesting to know what the percentage is, but a lot of matches, 50% of the time they could be making a mistake. So what do they do? What are their little habits? What might you pick up from them? Decide and create your own mistake ritual. I gave you a couple of ideas, but what is it? What could you do that helps you kind of let go of the mistake, stay in the moment, and get ready for the next point? The next one is visualize your new ritual. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. Really see yourself with the 4 R's and how you use those, how you react the way that you want to on the court, reinforcing that when you're kind of daydreaming and visualizing about a match, seeing yourself react the way that you want to. And this last one is very powerful. And in today's world, it's fairly easy to do. When I was coaching and getting video of everybody was difficult. But now, asking somebody or having somebody videotape you a little bit while you're playing a match, even if it's just for a couple of games. And it's so easy. Hand them your phone and ask them to just videotape you. And see what happens. Because it's some of the most unseen or unthought about time. Like, what happens? All right, the point ended. What do I do? What do I look like? Oh, how did I respond to that mistake? Or, wow, notice what I do when I'm playing well, I'm hitting the ball well. Okay, I have this kind of reaction. What am I doing when I make a mistake? What's my body language? What's it look like? And kind of study it, because a picture, is worth 1,000 words. What do you see? What could you do? What could you do differently? Okay, on how to deal with that. So a couple ways there to deal with mistakes and how to let those go. The last one I want to take a look at here is distractions. And what are the antidotes to distractions? And think about it for a minute. You just think about it, like what distracts you? And this is fresh for me because, again, this team that I've been coaching and watching them play, it's fascinating to see where they let their attention go. But is it, things that I hear, a teammate's look or a comment, or an opponent's look or a comment. Time, I hear a lot of people like, oh, well, I got to finish this match because I got to go pick up the kids, or I got to go do this, or we have dinner plans, and so they're distracted by time or family obligations. People watching. Now we're this 140 plus is into playoffs and trying to qualify for districts, so other teammates watching, and then it got interesting because, okay, now you're watching, but are you cheering or not? Can we hear you cheering? And all of that kind of going on in their mind while they're playing a match. So distractions, whether it's people on other courts, balls coming onto your court, there's a long, long list. So trying to maintain your focus and your concentration over the course of a match is a huge task. And when we get out there and thinking about the past can be distracting, while thinking about the future can lead to choking. That's when people start to think, oh, I've got this match, or I'm doing this. And you can get distracted by the fact of where you are in the score and what's going on. And our goal is really to try to stay in the here and now, which is definitely easier said than done. But getting that control of our mind and our thoughts. So let's take a look at, in dealing with distractions on the court, really sticking to that 3-second window. Whatever it is, a ball comes on your court, and you got to play a let, or there's somebody on the other court talking, or whatever it is, like 3 seconds, done. really not letting it linger. Okay? And using trigger words, like if you notice that you're, as Amy, my Australian player, would say, kind of taking a walkabout, your mind is sort of going off and you're wandering around. What's a trigger word that can bring you back? Whether it's, right back, or snap back, or here we go, be present, focus in, whatever it is for you, coming up with that. And this is, again, the beauty that I had of working with my players is I could tell when they were starting to drift off, and helping them find the words that would bring them right back in the moment. Okay? And visualizing your responses. So instead of letting something take you and distract you and go down that sort of rabbit hole, seeing yourself, okay, no worries. Got that look, or somebody hit the ball, at me, or I hear these noises. Visually, you know what's going to happen. You know stuff is coming up, and the more you've thought about it and kind of planned your response in the 3-second window, letting it go and being present, the more that is going to become ingrained as a habit. Okay? So part of it is, and this is your off-court work, and some of you that were on the Q&A call, think about it. List all the possible distractions. I mentioned a number of them while I was chatting, but what all the kind of distractions? And based on our Q&A call, if you really think about it, where do they go? Are they in your circle of control or influence or concern? I'm going to guess most of them are out in the kind of the concern area. So one of the biggest ways to deal with distractions is using that 3-second rule and keeping your focus on you, sticking to your routine, sticking to your plan, walking the line, some of the things that we talked about last time. But what is it that you can do and know what that reaction is and visualize it in that new ritual so that when you're out on the court, you know stuff's going to happen, but you know how to keep your mind, boom, focused and right here. Okay? Cool. So those are some of the things that I find to be really common obstacles, things that get on our way that can take us out of our game, and hopefully some of those antidotes will help you, and you can review those if that's one of the things for you, knowing how you're going to respond on the court. All right, the next piece I want to talk about is one of the things I noticed with a lot of my players and players I'm working with now. It's fascinating that they have a special kind of routine on match day, that everything has to be, perfect and well thought out, and how they prepare and all of that kind of, they're like, it's like a pilot's pre-flight checklist routine, and so the big day, and we got to be organized, and which is great, absolutely nothing wrong with that. And my athletes did the same thing. But as I was in it for a while, I thought, what I really want is folks and my players to go for peak practice, so that peak performance on match day is just sort of routine. So in order to do that, really need to kind of look at, think about, and create a pre-practice routine. Making practice as important and stimulus response oriented as a match day. Because the more you're prepared, then you increase that feeling of preparedness, confidence increases, and the feeling of control increases. So let's take a look, and this is in your handout. If you take a look on, I think it's on page 6. Okay. Here's how I want to break this down. I want you to think about, physically, what do you need to do to feel physically ready each time to go out on the court for practice? And I have some ideas, but I want to give you a couple of moments. You can type in some answers for me, or just start to fill out that checklist. Because I know we've all had the experience of going to practice and feeling unprepared. But in order to have peak practice, what are some of the things that you know you need to do and need to handle to be physically ready to have a great practice? So take a moment, jot some things down on your checklist, and I'll share some of mine. Visualizing it, yep. Okay. And physically, I mean, just at the very core level, like making sure, like a snack, I mean, again, for the physical, making sure that our blood sugar is stabilized, you've got proper food and drink, that you've got the stuff, yep, having a snack, you've got your bag packed accordingly. All the stuff that you know that you're going to need in there ahead of time, and maybe it's packed in a certain way. And you want to make sure that you're on time or early, because that can set you off and get you all, okay, plenty of water ahead of time, great. And then physically also, it's like, what's your warm-up routine? What do you need to do to get your body physically ready for, is it stretching? Is it doing some dynamic warm-up? Is there a brace you need to put on, or taping? Okay, got to have sunglasses. What do you do with your jewelry, your sunscreen? You got hair stuff. Got to make sure you go to the bathroom. There's a lot that goes into it. Again, this comes from me as a coach working with my players and watching all these things get handled on match day. But holy moly, coming to practice with, question I always get, hey coach, do you have any power bars? You got any food? Or, oh no, I forgot this, or I don't have this. I'm like, yeah. I mean, we spend more time generally practicing than we do competing in matches. So let's get the routine down. So I want you to continue to play with that and physically think of all the things that you need to do and handle to show up and be physically ready for practice. So if you go back to the performance pyramid, that's one piece. We talked about physical. Guess where we're also going to go? Mental. Okay, so we've taken care of our physical body, but now we need to get our mind ready for practice, for peak practice. What goes into that? Okay. So jot down just a couple of ideas, and then remember, mental is around thoughts and images. So the things that go on in your brain, what's important to you. And we started with physical first, because having taken care of a lot of those things can also help our mind get into the right mindset. Okay. So I'll share with some of the ones that I have found. Well, reviewing, hopefully everyone has some goal for this year, this calendar year, or this season, something that they are working on and striving for. So a real basic one is, if you've set those goals, you have that, one is to review it. Hopefully, and to think about, all right, what am I working on today at practice? What's important for me to do that's going to help me get a step closer to my goal, whatever that is. And it's a huge piece of motivation when you have those goals and you tie it into practice, okay, and reminding yourself. Okay? And maybe you write it down. Having a card, a couple 3x5 cards or something in your bag, and all right, today's focus at practice is this. Kind of pick one theme, one goal, one objective. Boy, then that can be so powerful in just helping you really get your mind focused in for practice. What is it that I'm trying? And writing it down is powerful. Yes, you might say it, but then writing it down and kind of reviewing it after. Okay. Visualization, we talked about that a little bit earlier. So getting your images powerful. How do you want this practice to go? Maybe you spend some time visualizing it in your mind on the drive over or when you get there. What's the attitude that you're going to bring? No matter what happens, I'm going to be in this kind of a mood. Maybe you're going through a self-talk routine and reviewing some of the words and phrases that you know are really powerful to you, kind of plugging that in. That's why I gave you that mindset training as a tool, like listening to that and really getting the inner dialogue, getting everything else stoked up. So mentally, and then just dealing with, making sure you've dealt with work stuff or family stuff, and that's handled, that you can walk on the court without having those distractions there, that you've got it handled. Okay, so you want to have and create your mental preparation checklist as well. What needs to happen to have peak practice? And then the last piece of the pyramid is emotionally. Okay, what's part of your emotional prep checklist for practice? Okay. Put music down. I mean, music, when you think about music, it's such a powerful tool. It's one of the most expensive items in a Hollywood movie. Okay? And why? Why is music such a huge part of a movie? It's not even a lyrical song, just the soundtrack, the music. Because music has a huge impact on the amygdala in the brain, and the amygdala is our emotional kind of control center. So having music, you see athletes, all the time now with their iPods and the earbuds in and listening to it. And I'd say for you, as you're going to practice, really encouraging you to have different types of music. Maybe it's a day where you're harried and you're anxious, or things are up, or it just hasn't been going well. I don't know that you're going to need pump-up music. You might need more mellow, calming music. Or it's the opposite day. Your kind of rear end is dragging. What is your pump-up music? What is it that just gets you right in that mood? And so that's an emotional trigger, and it's very, very powerful. So using it that way. Visualization is another one. Okay, kind of helps on all areas, but again, seeing yourself on the court, performing the way that you want to perform, feeling the way that you want to perform. Okay. For some folks, you have to figure out where you are on this one, but socializing. Some people, love to do that. It helps them loosen up and lighten up, and some don't want to do it. But if that's part of what helps you get emotionally in the right place, it works. For my athletes, some of them, coming from classes, they just needed a laugh. So there was always somebody on the team or something that you could always count on for a laugh. Some of them needed to kind of cry or scream, and luckily for us at Cal, our courts were next to the track and field, so just go in the bleachers over there and let it out, Doing whatever you need to do emotionally to adjust yourself before practice so that you really walk on the court ready. And what I'd like you to do with this does become your pilot's checklist. And actually for the next couple of weeks, write it down. And again, this is for practice, so write it down. What do you need to do physically, mentally, and emotionally? Because your goal is to have peak practice and get used to that habit so that when you go out on a match day, it's routine for you. You know how to prepare every time that you step onto the court. So write it down on a 3x5, 4x6 card, kind of put it in your racket bag. What is your preparation checklist? And play with it. Try it a couple times and literally physically check it off. And how does it feel? And think about it. How did that help you get prepared for practice? And then, how did it go? And weigh in on some of that. So we've talked about those 4 R's, which are great when you're on the court, but I also want you to do your best and to do the most that you can off the court so that when you walk on there, you're more in that mindset and the 4 R's are, easier and more of a trigger. Cool. All right, so let's do questions. Any questions from that session first about some of the things that can derail you in a match and what some of the antidotes were? We talked about anger, we talked about mistakes, we talked about how to deal with distractions. Anything that came up to mind on questions on that? Things for you to practice this week, and also for you to practice write up your preparation, on a checklist. So Lori, I'm a choker. I usually get angry at yourself. Absolutely. So working on those, especially in that first 3-second window, and working on those routines, because definitely I can hear you. That's a big one. Awesome. All right, so taking a look at your homework as you get what you prepare for. So your homework is to, and Lori, this will tie right into that, is to create your own on and off court antidote plan for the one situation that you struggle with. So I gave you some ideas and some suggestions that I found that have worked with the players that I've worked with, but play with it. What really does help? Because much like all of those things, anger, distraction, choking, they just become a habit. And there's a trigger, there's something out there that triggers it, and we kind of habitually go down that road. So much like the stimulus response, the triggers aren't necessarily going to go away, but we want to see and practice doing it differently and learning a different habit in the moment. So I want you to create that plan for yourself. I want you to finalize your practice preparation checklist and implement it for this coming week, and keep notes on it and see how it goes. And then the last thing is I had my assistant Sandy upload what I call a Nutrilog, a 3-day Nutrilog into your members area. And I would like you to fill that out and keep track before our next class. And what I found that works best is if you try to include one weekend day. And so one weekend day and 2 weekdays. And when you look at the sheet, just kind of note the time, whatever the time frame was that you ate it or had water or whatever it is. And don't get too hung up on like measuring quantities or this or that. But if it was a sandwich, okay, you had 2 pieces of bread, you had some meat, but don't go nuts and like weigh and measure everything. That's not important. What I want to be able to see is what you had and what time, and then do your best to check off the boxes. I kind of have whether it's what kind of if it's a carbohydrate or if it's a protein or this or that, and see where it goes. And ideally, if you have time, you can either scan it or take a picture of it and email it to me, because I would love to see a couple of them before our call next week. All right, so now we're going to start getting into some of that foundational work as well. So any other questions that have come up? I've got a couple of announcements that I want to make sure everybody knows about. One I'm extremely excited about, and I want you to, well, I'm always excited about most things, but mark your calendars. On May 2nd, I have set up an interview, a live phone interview call with my mentor, where I've learned a lot of this stuff from, is Dr. Jim Lair. And he has agreed to do an interview, and you'll see the USTA is going to be, NorCal is going to be promoting it. And I set up a page. It's called Ask Dr. Loehr, and his last name is Loehr. Ask Dr. Loehr. So AskDrLoehr. So you can go and sign up. It's free. It's just something that I want to do to give back, because this is a guy that he's always pulled in to talk at like the USPTA or Tennis Teachers Conference. But what I started to realize is that he's never really talked to this, and he's worked with obviously lots of huge name pros, but it's one of the first times that he's going to have the opportunity to talk to an audience of what I consider to be, the real players, which are folks like us that are out there every day playing. And he's a mental game master. Again, I've learned a ton. I always learn a ton from him. So the other thing that I've set up is that if you go to Ask Dr. Loehr, and register for the call, because I can only have so many people on the line, you'll also be able to submit your questions, which is going to be cool. So that's where the stuff's going to come from the interview. It's not just me, but I'm going to collect questions and find out what's most popular and have him answer it on the interview. So that's May 2nd. It will be at 11:30 a.m. like for an hour Pacific time. So for some of us at work, we're hoping maybe you can take an early lunch or make it work around there. So put that on your calendars. And the other announcement is some of you know that I run a summer academy. It's not a camp. It's definitely an academy. It's 3.5 days. And the 3.0, if your rating starts with a 3 or a 3.0 or above, it's July 31st to August 3rd. And if your rating starts with a 4 or above, it's on August 7th through the 10th at St. Mary's College. And what I have going on right now is I have a buddy campaign or a promo special going, so that now through the 25th of this month, if you sign up with a buddy, each of you get, I think it's $150 off the tuition. So I want to encourage you to attend. It's awesome. We have a lot of fun. It's 3.5 days. We cover all aspects of the game. If you can't, I know some people are on vacation, just let your friends know. It's an awesome experience. It's all women participants, all women coaches. It's beautiful. It's at St. Mary's. It's very intimate. It's an academy where I only allow 4 people on the court. I think you should be hitting balls and doing things, not standing in line. So we only have 4 players per court, and I have a coach on every court, and we do all the physical, mental, and emotional training. It's a great thing. So if you can join us, that'd be awesome. If you can't, just let your friends know, because we would love to have them. All right. So any questions? Anybody want to blast any questions over to me? Cool. Well, as you know, and I appreciate it, some of you have done that during the week and sent in the questions, which is awesome. I try to incorporate them into my notes and what I'm going to be talking about, or as well as get your answers back to you. So be ready to rock and roll again next week. We've got good chunk of content to cover, but let me know how things are going during the week, and if you have any questions or feedback for me, let me know, and I look forward to working with you all next week. Have a great evening. Take care.